Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to this recorded lecture on point of view, which is the perspective through which a story is told. And this is really important as we get into a whole quarter of literature where all of our stories, poems, plays, short stories, and novels all come from a particular perspective. Somebody's writing that, the author's writing it, but also a character is sharing something with you. And there's several different kinds of points of view. So we're going to take a look at how this might color our reading and how we might identify the points of view shared with us in our excellent readings. So the first thing we need to identify is who the narrator of this piece is. Who is the person telling us the story? And there's a couple different ways we can look at that. There is a first person point of view. The narrator uses the word I, and the narrator participates in the story. They're an active character most of the time. So if you think of the story of The Great Gatsby, which is required reading in most high schools, hopefully you got a chance to read it. If not, it's a fabulous book about the American dream and how difficult it is to achieve that sometimes. But there is the person who is telling the story in that novel is also a main character in that novel. And we can identify that first person by how they talk. So this quote, "In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had." So we're going to get this point of view, this character who's introspective, who's watching things happen around him, he's watching other characters interact, and his life experiences are going to color the way that he chooses to share the story. There's a first-person plural point of view where the narrator uses words like we. We see this in the Constitution where it says, "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common fence, promote the general welfare," all of that good stuff. The narrator uses we because multiple people are the author of that document. There is a second-person point of view, and this is when the narrator uses the word you. This is not very common most of the time. My favorite way of thinking about this is those choose your own adventure books. They were really, really popular, maybe like between 20 and 40 years ago was probably their heyday. So probably way before all of you were but a sparkle in your parents' eyes. But they're really fun. And if you ever want just a completely mindless, ridiculous read, go to your local library and find a choose your own adventure book. Because as you are reading it, you become the main character of the story and you have to make choices that lead you to whatever end the story takes. And these stories can have multiple endings. The Abominable Snowman can have 28 possible endings depending on the choices that you make throughout the book. So it's like a first player role-playing game except in book form, which is fun. So you become the main character. This does not happen very often. You're not going to have to worry about it very much in our class. But it is fun to know about. Second person point of view, if you ever want to win Jeopardy in the point of view category, this would be a good one to know. There is the third person point of view. This is where the narrator uses he, she, it, or they. The narrator is not participating in the story. They're kind of this more omniscient narrator where they're looking in from the outside and they're telling you about what happened to someone else. But they're not normally happening. They're not in the story. They're not motivating the characters. They're just watching the whole thing happen. A third person omniscient is where the narrator knows everything. And we see this in examples with J.R.R. Tolkien and The Hobbit, where it's someone who knows the whole story, who is looking back and telling you what happened. They're not involved in the story, but they are withdrawn from outside and they are all-knowing, which is why we use that word omniscient. That means all-knowing. There's a limited third-person omniscient, and this is where the narrator knows everything, but only about one character. They're not going to know everybody's motives. They're only going to know about one character, and that's normally the main character. So limited third-person omniscient is another example that we can find in point of view. Third-person objective, we get to see in Ernest Hemingway, a really famous American author, where the narrator doesn't describe characters' subjective experiences. He just relates facts. He's not telling us about feelings or emotions or our internal dialogue. This is like if we were watching a movie, nobody has a monologue, you're just watching action and dialogue. And those are the major types of points of view. Super fun. Hope you enjoyed it. See if you can identify what points of view are happening in our readings this week as we go through our active reading strategies.